In a weather-worn cottage tucked within the quiet suburbs of Ohio, Raymond's story began, not with thunder or grandeur, but with the simple cry of a newborn on a misty April morning. His mother, Eleanor, held him close to her chest, whispering hopes into his soft ears. May your life be kind, even when the world is not. Raymond grew up chasing fireflies in the backyard and racing his bicycle down gravel roads that curved like questions waiting for answers. His father, a retired mechanic with hands that told their own tales in grease and calluses, taught him how to mend things, radios, old clocks, and eventually his own heart. In school, he wasn't the loudest, nor the brightest, but he was the boy who noticed when someone needed help picking up spilled books or when a teacher wore tired eyes. He was the kind of boy who didn't just live life, he observed it, soaked it in, let it settle in his soul. At 17, Raymond discovered poetry, not in books, but in life itself. In the laughter of friends around a campfire. In the sigh his mother let out when no one was looking. In the way his father stared long into the distance when memories flooded in too fast. Even then, life was whispering its rhythm to him. And he listened. By the time Raymond turned 23, the boy who once chased fireflies had become a quiet man with ink-stained fingers and gentle ambitions. He worked as a clerk at a small publishing house in Cleveland, a job that paid modestly but nourished his love for stories. On his lunch breaks, he'd scribble fragments of poetry on coffee napkins, often forgetting to eat as he lost himself in words. It was in that publishing office, beneath flickering fluorescent lights and the hum of printers, that Raymond met Eleanor, not his mother, but a young woman with cinnamon-colored curls and an infectious laugh. She was the new copy editor, sharp-eyed and unafraid to call out mistakes others ignored. Their first conversation was accidental, a spilled coffee, an awkward apology, and then silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but one that lingered softly, like the hush before a favorite song begins. Over the following weeks, Raymond found excuses to walk by her desk. Sometimes he asked about sentence structure, other times, he pretended not to understand things just so she'd look up and smile as she explained. When he finally asked her to dinner, he stuttered. She laughed, not at him, but with a kindness that made his ears burn. That evening, over warm bowls of clam chowder in a modest diner, something began, something real. Love did not arrive for them in cinematic flashes. It came in quiet rituals, late-night bookstore strolls, handwritten notes slipped into coat pockets, rainy Sunday mornings spent listening to old records. They married under a canopy of oak trees in Eleanor's grandmother's backyard, surrounded by a few close friends, mismatched chairs, and the scent of late summer roses. Their life together was simple, but full. They moved into a small apartment with creaky floors, adopted a stray orange cat named Hemingway, and spent weekends experimenting with pancake recipes and reading newspapers aloud to each other. As Raymond stepped into his 30s, responsibilities grew. The company promoted him to assistant editor. The pace picked up. Bills arrived faster than paychecks. Eleanor became a high school teacher, and every evening she brought home stories of students who broke her heart or made her laugh unexpectedly. One day, she placed a small wrapped box in his lap. Inside, baby shoes, tiny and white. Raymond stared at them for a long time, speechless. Then he looked up, and Eleanor, nervous, glowing, hopeful, said just 3 words. Are you ready? He wasn't. Not really, but that's how life works. You leap before you know how far you'll fall. The baby arrived on a stormy October night, raindrops tapping the window like impatient fingers, wind howling with a kind of wild joy. They named her Lila, after Eleanor's favorite line of poetry, where lilacs bloom, hope follows. Raymond held her in trembling arms, overwhelmed not by fear, but by the sudden, aching clarity that everything, every poem, every heartbeat had led him here. Her tiny fingers curled around his, as if claiming him for a new story neither of them had read yet. Fatherhood didn't transform Raymond overnight. There were sleepless nights filled with lullabies hummed off-key, diapers changed with comic clumsiness, and moments of silent awe when Lila smiled in her sleep. But gradually, something subtle and steadfast grew inside him, a kind of quiet courage. The same kind his mother had whispered into his newborn ears. Life, as ever, kept its pace. Mornings were for rushed coffee and daycare drop-offs. Evenings were a blend of soft giggles, spilled applesauce, lesson planning, and stolen moments between yawns. And yet, in all its chaos, it was enough, more than enough. One evening, as Raymond rocked Lila to sleep, he noticed a stack of old napkins tucked inside a dusty box, the ones he'd written poetry on during lunch breaks. A quiet ache stirred. He hadn't written in months. That night, after Eleanor had gone to bed and Lila dreamed her tiny dreams, Raymond opened a notebook and wrote, I do not write to escape my life. I write to understand it. I write so Lila will know her father was not just a provider, but a man shaped by wonder, by books and broken clocks, by women named Eleanor, and the fireflies he once chased, down winding roads. The words didn't come all at once, but they returned like old friends, unhurried, gentle, familiar. Raymond began writing again, not for publishing, not for recognition, but for Lila and for himself, to leave behind a map of moments, etched in ink, that might one day help his daughter find her own rhythm in the world. Years slipped by like pages in a well-loved book, soft at the edges, filled with underlined moments and coffee stains of memory. Lila, now 8, had her mother's fire and her father's watchful wonder. She asked big questions about stars, about kindness, about why people cry when they're happy. On Saturday mornings, she'd curl beside Raymond with her sketchbook while he wrote, the silence between their pens as sacred as prayer. Eleanor, ever the lighthouse in their little world, continued teaching with conviction. Her stories at dinner now carried lessons not just for her students, but for Raymond too, about resilience, laughter, and the kind of strength that blooms in hallways lined with lockers and late homework. One evening, Raymond came across Lila in the living room, flipping through an old notebook. She looked up and asked, "Daddy, why don't you write poems about you?" He paused, because he never thought his own life was poem-worthy. But in that moment, under the warm buzz of the old lamp and the scent of Eleanor's herbal tea steeping in the kitchen, he realized perhaps it was. Not because it was grand, but because it was real. That night, he wrote, "My name is Raymond. I have lived in shadows and soft light.